Nova had learned a long time ago how to become invisible. Not completely gone. Not suspicious. Just easy to ignore. Quiet steps. Lowered gaze. Long sleeves. Even in warm weather. At 23, she had perfected the art of taking up less space than she deserved. Her body knew the rhythm of it, shoulders curved inward, footsteps that didn't echo, breathing that didn't disturb the air around her. She had been practicing since she was 16, and 7 years of survival had turned instinct into architecture. In a house as large and busy as Sloane Hartwell's, that kind of presence worked perfectly. No one questioned a nanny who did her job well and kept to herself. The wealthy didn't want drama from their staff. They wanted efficiency, discretion, and absolute reliability. Nova delivered all three without ever once making eye contact longer than necessary. And Nova did her job very well. She took care of Ember, a 6-year-old alpha pup with sharp eyes and a stubborn streak that would become formidable when she grew up. The girl asked questions Nova couldn't answer and noticed things children shouldn't notice. She had already figured out that Nova never rolled up her sleeves, even when they baked cookies together and flour dusted everything in sight. Ember was the daughter of Sloane Hartwell, one of the most powerful alpha billionaires in the city. 34 years old, self-made by 25 and ruthless in ways that made other alphas step carefully around her. Sloane was known for control, precision, and never making mistakes. Her face appeared on business magazine covers with regularity. Her name carried weight in boardrooms and government offices alike. She had built an empire from nothing, and everyone assumed she would die still holding every piece of it. To the outside world, this house was safe, controlled, untouchable. But Nova never believed in safety. Not really. She woke early, always before anyone else. Checked Ember's schedule. Prepared breakfast. Packed her things for school. Made sure everything ran smoothly before the first staff member yawned their way into the kitchen. She spoke gently, moved carefully, never raised her voice. Her existence was a quiet hum beneath the louder rhythms of the household. Ember liked her quickly, which surprised the staff. Alpha pups usually tested boundaries. Pushed omegas around, especially ones who didn't carry a scent. They had instincts they didn't understand yet, urges that came out as tantrums and commands, and little acts of dominance that adults called cute, but omegas learned to fear. But Ember didn't. She stayed close to Nova. Watched her with curiosity instead of dominance. Sometimes she would ask simple questions, delivered with the solemn intensity of a child who had learned early that adults lied. Why do you always wear long sleeves? Why don't you smell like other omegas? Why do you look at doors like you're waiting for something bad to come through? Nova would smile, soft and calm, and redirect the conversation. She was good at that. Redirecting. Avoiding. Surviving. She had been doing it for years. Sloane noticed things most people didn't. She didn't interfere often. She paid people to manage the household, so she didn't have to, but she observed. Observation was how she had built her company. She watched patterns, identified weaknesses, and struck when the timing was perfect. It was a skill, not a gift, and she had honed it over 2 decades of outmaneuvering people who thought they were smarter than her. She saw how Ember followed Nova without complaint. How the girl calmed down faster around her than with any of the other staff. How Nova never once crossed a line, never got too familiar, never assumed privileges she hadn't been given, but somehow held a quiet authority that Ember responded to. And she noticed something else too. The absence. No scent. No trace of omega pheromones, even at close distance. Nova moved through rooms and left nothing behind, no warmth, no signal, no biological signature that said omega here. It wasn't that her scent was faint or suppressed by blockers. It simply wasn't there. That wasn't normal. Not rare, exactly. There were medical conditions, traumatic injuries, gland damage from accidents or illness. But those were exceptions, not rules. A scentless omega usually meant something had gone wrong. Something had broken. Sloane didn't ask about it. Not yet. But she didn't ignore it either. The first real shift happened on an ordinary afternoon. Ember had been playing, too energetic, bouncing off furniture, pretending the living room was a spaceship. She knocked over a glass of water reaching for a toy, and the entire contents spilled across the table and onto Nova's shirt. It soaked through immediately. Nova froze for half a second. Not because of the mess. She had cleaned up worse things without blinking. But because wet fabric clung, and what it clung to was not smooth. The scars on her arms pressed against the cotton like secrets trying to escape. She could feel the outline of them, raised tissue, uneven texture, stories written in damage. She reacted quickly. "It's fine," she told Ember, voice steady despite the way her heart had started hammering. "I'll change and be right back." She moved fast toward the guest room nearby. One of the few places she could change without going all the way back to her quarters in the staff wing. The door was unlocked. She hadn't thought to lock it because no one ever came to this part of the house in the middle of the afternoon. She didn't lock it. She should have locked it. Nova pulled her shirt over her head, turning her back to the door out of habit. The mirror on the far wall showed her what she already knew, a map of damage across her shoulder blades, her spine, her ribs. Long thin scars from something sharp. Circular marks, darker and deeper, from something hot. Burn scars, some old, some newer, but poorly healed, like whoever had inflicted them hadn't bothered with aftercare. Faint bruising along her left side. Yellowing, fading, but still visible. The kind that didn't come from a single incident. And lower, near her right shoulder blade, a mark that made even her flinch to look at. A clear imprint. Repeated, layered, deliberate. Someone had tried to control an omega's gland area. Over and over again. Had pressed devices there, injected chemicals there, bitten there in ways that were never meant to heal cleanly. Had tried to force a bond that Nova's body had fought with everything it had. The door opened. Sloane walked in without knocking. Not unusual in her own house. She was looking for a file, something she thought had been left there earlier. Her assistant had mentioned it in passing, and Sloane had simply turned left instead of right, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. She stopped the moment she crossed the threshold. Nova had her back turned. Shirt halfway off. The wet fabric bunched around her elbows, exposing everything from her waist to her shoulders. For a second, neither of them moved. Then the silence shifted. Not awkward. Not confused. Something heavier. Sloane's body went still in a way that wasn't relaxation, it was focus. The kind of stillness predators had right before they decided what to do. She saw everything in one glance. The scars. The burns. The bruising. The ruined gland site. Her jaw tightened. Nova reacted first. She pulled the shirt back on too fast, fingers shaking just slightly. The wet fabric clung again, but she didn't care. It was coverage, and coverage was safety. She didn't turn around immediately. She needed 1 second. Just one. To breathe. To force her face into something that wouldn't give her away. When she finally faced Sloane, her expression was calm. Too calm. Controlled in a way that didn't belong to someone caught off guard. It was the control of someone who had learned to erase herself from her own face. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I thought the room was empty." Sloane didn't respond right away. She wasn't looking at Nova's face. She was replaying what she had just seen, fitting it into patterns she knew too well from news reports and whispered stories, and the kind of research she had done for cases she didn't talk about in public. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't neglect. That wasn't a single traumatic event followed by proper medical care. That was sustained abuse. Targeted. Controlled. Someone had done that on purpose over time, with knowledge of how omega bodies reacted. With intention. "Who did that to you?" Sloane's voice was low, steady, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like restraint. Like she was holding herself back from asking other questions. Louder questions. Nova's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. Not surprise. Not even fear. Recognition. She had heard that tone before. Not from someone like Sloane, someone powerful, someone who could ask questions and expect answers, but from someone who thought they had the right to ask. Someone who had asked in that same low, steady voice before doing things that made the scars on Nova's back look like decorations. "It's in the past," Nova said. "It doesn't affect my work." "That's not what I asked." The air shifted again. Ember's laughter echoed faintly from down the hall, completely unaware of what was happening just a few rooms away. The sound was bright and young and so painfully normal that Nova felt something crack inside her chest. She glanced toward the door for a moment, grounding herself. "I can still take care of Ember," she said. "That's what matters." Sloane stepped closer. Not aggressively. Not looming. But with intention. The distance between them closed enough that most Omegas would react automatically to alpha presence, a flinch, a drop of the eyes, a subtle shift toward submission. Nova didn't. No flinch. No instinctive submission. Just stillness. That confirmed it. Her gland wasn't functioning properly, or it had been damaged badly enough to suppress everything. The biological pathways that should have triggered fear responses, submission responses, omega responses, they were either broken or had been trained into silence so completely that they no longer worked. "That still doesn't answer my question," Sloane said. Nova met her gaze this time. Calm. But there was something under it. Not weakness. Something harder. "I'm not in danger anymore." That was the first lie. Sloane knew it immediately. Not because of the words, they were plausible, even reasonable, but because of how they were said. The slight pause before anymore. The way Nova's throat moved when she swallowed. The way her fingers had curled into the wet fabric of her shirt, like she needed something to hold on to. Nova believed she was safe enough to function. That wasn't the same as being safe. There was a difference, and it was a dangerous one. Sloane exhaled slowly, then stepped back, not pushing further. "Not yet. Get changed," she said. "Ember is waiting." Nova nodded once. "Yes." Sloane left the room, but she didn't go back to work. She went straight to her office, closed the door, and made a call. Short. Direct. She didn't explain everything, just enough. "I need a full background check on someone named Nova. She came through the agency last month. I want medical records, previous employment, anything that was buried. And I want to know if anyone has accessed that agency's database recently from outside." She hung up before questions came. Across the house, Nova returned to Ember as if nothing had happened. She smiled, continued the routine, read a story, corrected homework, kept everything steady. But her mind wasn't calm. It hadn't been calm since the door opened. She knew what Sloane had seen. The scars. The damage. The story written on her skin in a language no one should have to read. And more importantly, she knew what kind of woman noticed things like that. What kind of woman asked who instead of what happened. That night, after Ember was asleep, Nova stood alone in her room staring at her reflection. She rolled up her sleeves slowly, exposing the faint marks that didn't fully fade even after years of healing. Her hand hovered near her collar, near the place where an Omega's gland should react, should produce something. Anything. Nothing. Just silence. "I'm safe now," she whispered to herself. Barely audible. She didn't believe it. Somewhere else in the city, a different woman looked at a screen filled with stolen data. A list of names. Employment records. Background checks that were supposed to be confidential. One of them was highlighted. Nova. Not her real name. Not the name this woman had given her. But the face matched. The height, the build, The way the photo showed someone trying to look smaller than they were. Ren Castellano smiled slightly. Found you. And in Sloane Hartwell's house, without anyone saying it out loud, something had already begun to change. The next morning looked normal on the surface. Ember woke up early, asked for the same breakfast she always asked for, pancakes, but only the small ones, cut into triangles. Complained about her schedule with the theatrical despair of a 6-year-old who had been asked to do something mildly inconvenient, and stayed close to Nova like always. Nova moved through the routine without missing a step. Calm. Steady. Reliable. If anyone had walked in, they would have seen exactly what they expected, a quiet Omega nanny doing her job well. Making breakfast. Packing a backpack. Tying small shoes with practiced efficiency. But Sloane wasn't looking at the surface anymore. She watched patterns. And now that she had seen the scars, everything about Nova felt different. Not suspicious. Not wrong. Just incomplete. Like a story with a missing middle. Like a book where someone had torn out the chapters between the beginning and the end. She didn't bring it up again that morning. Didn't question Nova in front of Ember. Didn't push. Didn't show anything on her face. But the moment she stepped into her office, the call she had made the night before came back with results. The woman on the other end was Rain, her head of security. Someone who had worked with her for years and knew how to find information others tried to bury. Rain didn't waste time on pleasantries. The agency she came from was compromised, Rain said. About 3 weeks ago. Someone accessed internal records. Not random, targeted searches. Your household was flagged. Sloane's expression didn't change. And Nova? Rain paused for half a second, then continued. No clean history. That's not unusual for Omegas trying to start over, new name, new city, new job. But this one is different. There are gaps. Big ones. Before 6 months ago, she doesn't exist under that name. But you found something else. Original identity likely changed. Cross-matching medical records, injury patterns, and shelter reports, I found a probable match. Name before was different, something she's not using anymore. But the records tie her to an alpha named Ren Castellano. The name meant nothing to Sloane. Not yet. Rain clarified immediately. Ren Castellano. Private investor. Quiet reputation publicly. But flagged multiple times in underground reports. Pattern of Omega ownership, control behavior, possible illegal bonding attempts. Nothing proven in court. Everything buried. Sloane's fingers tapped once against her desk. What kind of control? Rain didn't soften it. Physical abuse. Pheromone suppression. Isolation. Reconditioning. The kind that breaks Omega response systems. If Nova is who I think she is, she didn't just leave. She escaped. The words stayed in the room longer than the sentence. Escaped. That explained the scars. The lack of scent. The way Nova didn't react to alpha presence at all. Her gland hadn't just been damaged, it had been targeted repeatedly. Intentionally. Someone had tried to break something inside her, and when they couldn't break it entirely, they had settled for making it unusable. And now? Sloane asked. Rain answered immediately. There's more. The same breach that exposed your household also shows external interest. Someone is tracking the same data set. It lines up with Ren Castellano's known network. She's looking for someone. High probability it's Nova. Sloane didn't respond for a moment. Then calmly, increase internal security. No visible changes. I don't want her alarmed. And Ren, find out how close she is. Already working on it, Rain said before the call ended. Across the house, Nova had no idea how much had already been uncovered. But she felt the shift anyway. Not in obvious ways. No alarms. No guards suddenly appearing. No one pulling her aside for questions. But small things. A door that was usually left open was now closed. A camera angle slightly adjusted. staff moving a bit more carefully, speaking in lower voices when they thought no one was listening. It wasn't enough to confirm anything, but it was enough to trigger something in Nova that never fully turned off. Awareness. The kind you learn when you've had to survive. When you've spent years listening for footsteps, reading the moods of the people around you, noticing when the atmosphere changed before anyone said a word. Her body knew before her mind did. Her shoulders would tighten. Her breathing would shallow. She would start cataloging exits without meaning to. Ember tugged on her sleeve, asking her to sit and help with the drawing. Nova did, forcing her focus back. "That's good," she said gently, guiding the girl's hand. Ember looked up at her with those sharp eyes and asked, "Why do you always look like you're listening to something far away?" Nova paused for a second, then smiled. "Just making sure everything is okay." Ember accepted that answer easily. Children didn't question what felt safe. They absorbed the mood of the adults around them and called it reality. Nova wished she could still do that. Later that afternoon, Sloane crossed paths with Nova in the hallway. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't avoided either. They stopped just long enough to acknowledge each other. No one else was around. Sloane studied her openly this time. Not her face, her posture. Her breathing. The way her weight was distributed, slightly favoring one leg, ready to move if she needed to. The way her eyes had already swept the hallway once, noting the exits, the windows, the distance to the nearest door. Nova stood straight, composed. But there was tension under it now. Subtle but present. She felt it too. "I asked for your file," Sloane said without warning. Nova didn't react outwardly, but her eyes sharpened just slightly. "That's your right," she replied calmly. "It's incomplete." "That's intentional." There was no hesitation. No attempt to deny it. That told Sloane more than any report could have. Nova wasn't hiding because she had something to be ashamed of. She was hiding because she had something to fear. "Why?" Sloane asked. Nova held her gaze. "Because some things are better left where they are." "That depends on whether they're coming back," Sloane said quietly. That landed. Nova's fingers tightened slightly at her side. Almost unnoticeable. She didn't answer immediately. Then, carefully, "I handled it." Another lie. Not careless. Not weak. Controlled. But still a lie. Sloane stepped closer again. Not enough to corner her, just enough to close distance. Close enough that Nova could feel the warmth of her, could smell the clean, sharp scent of an alpha who wasn't posturing but didn't need to. Cedar and something colder. Winter air. It was the first time Nova had registered an alpha scent without flinching. She didn't know what to do with that. "If someone is looking for you, that becomes my problem," Sloane said. "You're in my house. Around my daughter." Nova's voice stayed steady. "I would never let anything reach Ember. I believe that." Sloane's tone didn't soften. But belief doesn't stop people. Silence again. Not empty. Heavy. Nova finally said, "I'm not who I was before." Sloane answered just as evenly. "The person who did that to you might not care." That was the first time something real showed on Nova's face. Not fear. Not panic. Just a flicker of something unresolved. A wound that had never fully closed because someone kept picking at the edges. Then it disappeared. "If there's a risk, I'll leave," Nova said. "No." The answer came instantly. Sharply. Nova frowned slightly, caught off guard for the first time. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know enough." "That's not." Nova. The sound of her own name, spoken in that low, steady voice, stopped her. Sloane wasn't arguing. She was stating. And there was something in her expression, not pity, not concern, something harder and more complicated, that made Nova's chest ache in a way she didn't have words for. "You're not leaving," Sloane said. "Not because of her." Nova shook her head slightly. "You can't protect me from everything." "I'm not trying to protect you from everything." Sloane's gaze didn't waver. "I'm trying to make sure you don't have to run anymore." That hit somewhere Nova didn't want to be hit. She looked away first. "I need to check on Ember," she said, and moved past Sloane before she could respond. Routine resumed. But the balance had shifted. No longer invisible. No longer untouched. That night, Rain sent another update. Short. Precise. Ren Castellano confirmed active in the city. Financial movement tied to a rival firm targeting your company. This isn't random, they're connected. And one more thing. We intercepted a partial message. A name was mentioned. Sloane read the single word on the screen. Nova. She didn't react outwardly. She just closed the file, stood up, and looked out across the city lights for a moment. The skyline glittered below her, buildings she owned, companies she controlled, an empire built on decisions exactly like the one she was about to make. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to reach her house. Not her daughter. And not the Omega who had already survived more than she should have. Somewhere else, Ren Castellano looked at the same name and smiled. Slow. Certain. You hid well, she murmured. But not well enough. And in the quiet space between those two women, Nova continued doing what she had always done. Surviving. Unaware that this time, running might no longer be enough. By the third day, the feeling of being watched was no longer something Nova could ignore. It wasn't obvious. No one followed her in plain sight. No strange calls. No direct threats. But the pattern was there if you knew how to read it. A car that stayed parked longer than it should across the street from the staff entrance. A delivery driver who looked at the house too carefully, who lingered after handing off packages. Small disruptions that didn't belong, a gate left open that should have been closed, a security patrol that passed 5 minutes later than usual. Nova didn't say anything at first. She had learned long ago that reacting too early made things worse. It gave people information. It showed them what you were afraid of. The smart move was to wait, to watch, to gather your own data before making any decisions. But inside, something old was waking up again. Something that had never really gone away. Survival instincts didn't disappear. They just waited. Sloane noticed it too, but from a different angle. Rain's updates had become more frequent, and each one confirmed what Sloane already suspected. Ren Castellano was not just looking. She was closing in. Financial traces linked her directly to a rival firm that had been trying to pressure Sloane's company for months. It wasn't just about Nova anymore. It was leverage. If Ren got to Nova, she would have something far more valuable than information. She would have control. And people like Ren didn't stop once they had that. That afternoon, something small finally broke the surface. Nova was in the kitchen preparing Ember's lunch when one of the house staff, a young beta assistant named Quinn, walked in holding a package. Quinn had been working in the house for about a year, responsible for deliveries and scheduling. She looked confused. "This just arrived," she said, holding up a simple white box. No sender name. No return address. It was addressed to you. Nova froze for half a second. Not visibly, just a pause in the rhythm of her hands. "I didn't order anything." Quinn shrugged slightly. It was already cleared at the gate. Security didn't flag it. That was the first real problem. Nothing got through that gate without being checked. The security team was thorough, background checks on every delivery driver, scans of every package, protocols that had been designed by people who thought about threats the way normal people thought about traffic. If this passed inspection, it meant whoever sent it knew how the system worked, knew what would trigger an alert and what wouldn't. Nova took the box carefully. It was light. No ticking. No weight that suggested danger. Still, her fingers were steady in a way that came from experience, not calm. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single item. A fresh white flower. And underneath it, a small card. Nova didn't need to read it to know. The handwriting was familiar before her eyes processed the shapes. Neat. Controlled. The kind of handwriting that came from someone who believed every mark they made mattered. You don't lose what belongs to you. Quinn frowned. Is that a joke or something? Nova closed the box immediately. It's nothing. Probably a mistake. But her voice was quieter than usual. Quinn hesitated, then nodded and left. She didn't push. People in this house knew when not to ask questions. It was part of the job description. Nova stood there for a few seconds longer, the box still in her hands. Her breathing stayed even. But her mind was already moving, calculating, running through possibilities with the cold precision of someone who had done this before. She hadn't used that name. She hadn't left a trail that obvious. The agency had been clean. She had checked everything before coming here, had paid someone to check again, had taken every precaution she could afford. No paper trail. No digital footprint. No connections to the person she used to be. So how? And who? Sloane's voice cut in from behind her. What's that? Nova turned. She hadn't heard Sloane walk in. That alone told her something. She had been distracted. Unfocused. Sloppy. I don't know, Nova said. Sloane stepped closer and took the box from her hands without asking. She opened it, read the card once, and her expression didn't change. But something in her posture did. Tighter. Colder. This isn't random, Sloane said. Nova didn't answer. This is her. Sloane's voice was quieter now. That landed. No need to say the name. They both knew who her was. Nova looked away first. It doesn't mean she knows where I am. Sloane didn't respond immediately. She took out her phone and sent a quick message to Rain, presumably. Then she set the box aside. It means she's close enough to test the perimeter, Sloane said. Nova's jaw tightened slightly. Then I'll leave. No. The answer came instantly. Sharply. Just like before. Nova looked at her, frustration breaking through the calm for the first time. You don't understand how this works. She doesn't stop. She doesn't negotiate. If she knows I'm here, she will keep pushing until... Until what? Sloane cut in. Nova didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Sloane stepped closer. Not aggressive, but firm. Close enough that Nova could feel the heat of her, could see the way her jaw was set, the way her hands had curled into loose fists at her sides. Running didn't stop her before, Sloane said. It won't stop her now. Nova's eyes flickered. That was true. She had run. Changed her name. Disappeared. And Ren still found her. Still tracked her. Still sent flowers to houses where she wasn't supposed to exist. I won't risk Ember, Nova said quietly. You won't. Sloane's voice was steady. Certain. Because I won't let anything reach her. There was something in her tone that made Nova pause. Not arrogance. Not empty confidence. Certainty. The kind that came from someone who had already decided the outcome before the game started. Before Nova could respond, Ember's voice called from the other room. Nova, come see this. The moment broke. Nova turned, forcing herself back into routine, and walked out to join the girl. She could feel Sloane's gaze on her back the whole way. Sloane stayed behind for a second longer, then picked up the box again and stared at the flower. A message. A warning. Or a claim. She wasn't sure which one worried her more. Rain called back within minutes. We missed it, she said immediately. The package came through a third-party vendor that's been used before. Clean records. No flags. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to bypass initial screening. Ren? Sloane asked. Most likely. Rain's voice was tight. And there's more. We've been tracking unusual activity near the property. Not constant surveillance, but periodic checks. Someone is mapping patterns. Delivery schedules. Security rotations. Staff arrivals and departures. Sloane's gaze shifted toward the hallway where Nova had gone. She's escalating. Yes. And if she's this close, she's not just testing. She's planning. Sloane ended the call and didn't move for a moment. Then she made another decision. That evening, she called Nova into her office. No pretense this time. No routine to hide behind. Just the two of them, the door closed, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against the walls. Nova stood across from her, posture straight, expression controlled again. But there was no point pretending nothing was happening anymore. She knows, Sloane said. Nova didn't argue. I'm relocating you and Ember temporarily, Sloane continued. Private property. No external access. Controlled staff only. Nova shook her head immediately. That's too much attention. If she's watching, moving like that confirms everything. Staying confirms it too, Sloane said. Silence. Nova exhaled slowly. You don't understand her. Then explain. Nova hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because saying it out loud made it real again. Made it something that existed outside her own head, where other people could see it and judge it and use it against her. She doesn't see Omegas as people, Nova said finally. She sees them as things to shape, to break and rebuild. If she thinks I'm still hers, she won't stop. Not for money. Not for risk. Sloane listened without interrupting. She tried to force a bond, Nova added quietly. More than once. That explained the gland damage. The control marks. Everything. And she failed, Sloane said. Nova met her eyes. I escaped. That word again. It carried more weight than any other. Sloane nodded once. Then you don't go back. Nova almost smiled at that, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That's not always a choice. It is now. Another silence. Longer this time. Nova could feel something shifting between them, not just the conversation, but the shape of their relationship. The roles they had been playing. The walls Nova had built. Finally, Nova said, if we move, we do it quietly. No visible security changes. No obvious routes. And Ember doesn't know anything is wrong. Agreed, Sloane said. That was the first time they were fully aligned. Later that night, while the house slept, Rain's team began preparing the relocation. Unmarked vehicles. Rotating routes. Minimal staff involvement. Everything designed to disappear without looking like it had. Sloane had built contingency plans for situations like this, not specifically for a hunted Omega, but for threats in general. She believed in being prepared. Nova packed a single bag. Not much. She had learned not to accumulate things. Possessions were anchors, and anchors kept you from running fast enough. She stood in her room for a moment, looking at the small space she had occupied for 6 months. The bed she had slept in. The desk where she had written in a journal she would burn before she left. The mirror where she had checked her collar every morning to make sure nothing was showing. She was leaving. Again. She told herself it was different this time. That Sloane wasn't Ren. That this move was protection, not captivity. That she wasn't running, she was being moved. It felt the same. Somewhere in the city, Ren Castellano watched another update come through on her screen. Movement patterns. Security shifts. Small changes that meant everything if you knew how to read them. Her informant inside Sloane's operation wasn't high-level, just a low-tier logistics coordinator who needed money and didn't ask questions, but she didn't need high-level. She needed patterns. And the patterns were changing. Preparing to run again, little Omega? Ren murmured, tracing the edge of the screen with one finger. Or is someone running for you? Her smile returned. Either way, there you are. The hunt was no longer quiet. And for the first time since she arrived in this house, Nova felt it clearly. She wasn't just being watched anymore. She was being hunted. The relocation happened before sunrise. No announcement. No visible rush. Just a quiet shift in routine that most people in the house wouldn't even notice until hours later. Rain had planned everything down to the smallest detail. 2 identical vehicles left the property at slightly different times, one carrying decoys, the other carrying Sloane, Nova, and Ember. The drivers switched routes twice within the first 30 minutes. No direct path. No predictable pattern. It was clean, controlled, and efficient. But even with all that, Nova didn't relax for a second. She sat in the back beside Ember, one hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder, her eyes scanning reflections in the window, tracking movement without turning her head. She had done this before. Not like this, not with protection, not with someone else making the decisions, but with the same awareness. The same hypervigilance. The difference now was that she wasn't alone. And somehow that made it worse. Because if anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be her this time. Ember didn't know anything was wrong. She thought they were going on a short trip, a mini vacation, Sloane had called it, with a straight face that impressed Nova more than it should have. The girl asked questions, pointed at things outside, leaned against Nova like always. That normalcy made everything sharper for Nova, because if anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be her this time. They arrived at the safe house just after dawn. It was a private coastal property owned by Sloane through a shell company that didn't have her name on any paperwork. Rarely used. Secured, but not obvious. No large staff. No heavy presence. Just a small, trusted team already in place. Rain was there in person, something she didn't usually do unless the situation was serious. She greeted Sloane with a brief nod, then looked at Nova for a moment longer, assessing her. Not as a threat. As a variable in the situation. Perimeter is clean, Rain said. We rotate patrols every 2 hours. No external access without clearance. Sloane nodded. Keep it quiet. Nova said nothing, but she registered everything. Entry points. Exits. Blind spots. The location of every window, every door, every potential vulnerability. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit. For a few hours, things settled into a temporary routine. Ember explored the new place, distracted and curious. Nova stayed close, guiding her, keeping everything stable. Sloane worked remotely, but her attention wasn't fully on the screen. Every update from Rain came through immediately. Every small change was noted. The first crack came in the afternoon. Rain received a call from one of her field contacts, a woman named Vera, a security contractor who handled external intel. Vera wasn't part of the household, but she had access to information outside official channels. Her voice on the line was tight. We have a problem. What kind? Rain asked. Ren made a move. She took someone. One of your logistics people, Mira, the one who handles supply routing. Rain's expression hardened. Mira wasn't high level, but she had enough access to patterns. Enough to be useful under pressure. Enough to be a bargaining chip. Where? Rain asked. Warehouse district. We lost visual after extraction. But she left a message. Rain didn't need to ask who it was for. When Sloane heard, she didn't react immediately. She listened to the details. The location. The demands simple, direct. Nova comes alone or Mira dies. Then she dismissed everyone except Nova. Ember was already occupied in another room, unaware of anything. She's not just tracking anymore, Sloane said. Nova understood immediately. She wants to draw me out. Sloane nodded. Mira doesn't matter to her. She's leverage. Nova's jaw tightened. Then she'll escalate until she gets what she wants. And what she wants is you, Sloane said. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncertainty. It was calculation. Both of them thinking. Both of them running through options, contingencies, costs. Nova spoke first. If we do nothing, she hurts Mira. Then she takes someone else. Maybe closer. Or she tries to breach here, Sloane added. Nova looked at her directly. She won't stop. I know. Another pause. Then Nova said it clearly, without hesitation, without the careful deflection she usually wrapped around hard truths. I'll go. Sloane's answer came instantly. No. This is about me. Nova's voice was steady but firm. She's not after your company. She's not after your daughter. She's after me. And that makes it my problem, Sloane replied. Nova shook her head slightly. You can't control this the way you control everything else. She doesn't think like you. Then we adapt. If I don't show up, Mira dies. And then it keeps going. Sloane didn't look away. If you do show up, you walk into exactly what she wants. That's the point, Nova said quietly. That was when Sloane understood. Not just the plan, the mindset behind it. Nova wasn't offering. She had already decided. Before Sloane had even known there was a decision to make. You're not offering, Sloane said. You've already decided. Nova didn't deny it. I'm not running again. That hit harder than anything else she had said so far. Because Sloane could hear what was underneath it, not courage exactly. Not desperation. Something more complicated. A refusal to let fear make her choices for her anymore. Sloane exhaled slowly, then turned slightly, thinking. Not rejecting the idea. Adjusting it. If you go, she said finally, you don't go alone. Nova didn't respond immediately. This becomes controlled, Sloane continued. We set the location. We set the timing. We monitor everything. And if she doesn't agree, she will. Sloane's voice was cold now, not with anger, with certainty. Because she thinks she's in control. That was the key. The message came an hour later. Not directly to Nova. To Rain, through the same intercepted channels. Coordinates. Time. Simple instructions. Come alone. Nova read it once and handed it back. She expects me to follow that. You won't, Sloane said. Preparation moved fast after that. Rain coordinated. Teams set up positions around the meeting point. Mapped out sight lines, exit routes, contingencies. Snipers were placed at a distance, hidden, waiting. Communication lines were secured. Nova changed into neutral clothing. Nothing that stood out. Nothing that could be used against her. Her hands were steady. Too steady. Before they left, Sloane stopped her. This is where you listen to me, Sloane said quietly. She wasn't asking. You don't react to anything she says. You don't move unless I tell you. And if something goes wrong, you get out. That's the priority. Nova met her gaze. And Mira. We get her out too. Sloane's voice didn't soften. But not at the cost of you. Nova didn't argue. Not this time. The meeting point was an abandoned structure on the edge of the industrial zone. Open enough for visibility. Isolated enough for control. The kind of place someone like Ren would choose, not because it was strategic, but because it made her feel powerful. Empty space. Echoing footsteps. Nowhere to hide. Nova walked in first, exactly as instructed. Alone. From Ren's perspective, Ren Castellano was already there. She hadn't changed. Same calm posture. Same controlled expression. Like nothing had ever happened. Like time hadn't passed at all. She stood in the center of the room, hands clasped behind her back, waiting with the patience of someone who had never doubted the outcome. I knew you'd come, Ren said. Almost pleased. Nova stopped a few feet away. Didn't answer. Ren's eyes moved over her slowly, assessing. Taking in the changes. The differences. The ways Nova had rearranged herself into someone else. You look different, Ren said. But still mine. Nova's hands stayed at her sides. I'm not anything of yours. Ren smiled slightly. We'll fix that. Behind the scenes, everything was in place. Rain's voice came through Sloane's earpiece. Target confirmed. Hostage is inside, restrained. We have visual. Sloane's focus didn't leave Nova. Ren took a step closer. Lifted something from her pocket, a small device. Pheromone suppressor. Nova recognized it instantly. The shape of it. The way it fit in Ren's palm like an extension of her hand. Let's not make this difficult, Ren said. And in that moment, everything tightened. Because this wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was about to become a fight. Everything happened fast, but not chaotic. It followed a pattern, just not the one Ren expected. The moment she activated the small device in her hand, a sharp chemical signal released into the air. It wasn't a scent in the normal sense. It was designed to suppress omega response and amplify alpha dominance. To force submission through biology. Through pathways that couldn't be reasoned with or argued away. Nova felt it immediately. Her chest tightened. Her breathing shifted. And for a split second, her body reacted the way it had been trained to react: freeze, lower, submit. The old programming. The one Ren had spent years installing. But it didn't complete. It stopped halfway, like something inside her refused to follow through. Like some part of her biology had been damaged beyond even the suppressor's ability to control. That hesitation was enough to change everything. Ren noticed it too. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Still resisting, she said, voice calm but edged now. You were always stubborn. She stepped closer, raising her hand toward Nova's collar, aiming directly for the gland area. Like she had done before. Like this was routine. Like Nova was still the same omega she had left behind. Nova didn't step back. She didn't drop her gaze. But her body wasn't calm. Her heart was racing, muscles tight, every instinct pulling in different directions. The suppressor was working, but not completely. Something was interfering. Something she couldn't name. And then she felt it. Sloane's presence. Not physically. Not through scent. Nova couldn't smell her. But something else. A weight at the edge of her awareness. A steadiness that cut through the chemical fog Ren had unleashed. It wasn't dominance pressing down on her. It was something else entirely. Something that felt like an anchor. Nova didn't understand it. She didn't have time to. But her body understood. Her breathing steadied. Her shoulders didn't drop into submission, they straightened. The panic that had been spiraling in her chest slowed, then stopped. Not because she wasn't afraid. Because something else was louder than the fear. Ren saw the shift. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the perimeter without turning her head. You're bonded, she said slowly. Disbelief. Then something uglier. To her. Not fully, Nova said. And it was true. There was no mark. No completed bond. But something had already begun, something that had been growing since the first night Sloane said you're not leaving. Ren's expression hardened. That's why you didn't break. Her voice was colder now. You replaced one with another. No. Nova's voice was quiet, but firm. I chose something different. That word, chose, didn't fit Ren's world. Her grip tightened on the device, and for the first time, aggression edged into her movements. You don't choose, she said. You respond. That's how you're built. Nova didn't argue. She just stood there, resisting in a way that wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but was absolute. Now, Sloane said quietly into the calm. Everything moved at once. The shot came from the left side, not aimed at Ren, but at the device in her hand. The suppressor shattered, chemical output cutting off instantly. At the same moment, Rain's team moved in from the perimeter, fast and precise, closing the distance. Ren reacted immediately. She grabbed Nova, pulling her sharply back, using her as a shield. A weapon appeared in her other hand, not pointed at Nova, but angled outward toward the incoming team. Stop, she said, voice cold again. Controlled. Or she gets hurt. The movement was too close. Too fast. Sloane's body reacted before her mind finished the thought. She moved forward, breaking from position, closing the gap faster than planned. Don't. Rain's voice snapped through the calm. But it was too late. Nova felt Ren's grip tighten. Felt the shift in her stance. This was the moment everything could collapse. If Ren repositioned fully, if she got leverage again, this would turn into something else entirely. Nova made a decision. She shifted her weight, just enough not to break free, but to throw off Ren's balance. For a fraction of a second. It wasn't strength. It was timing. Ren adjusted instantly. But that one moment was enough. Sloane reached them. She didn't stop. Didn't slow down. She closed the distance and drove Ren back, breaking her grip on Nova with force that wasn't calculated anymore. It was instinct. Pure alpha response, triggered by threat. Ren stumbled, recovered, swung back. But she wasn't facing the same situation anymore. She wasn't controlling it. She was reacting. Take her, Sloane said without looking, already positioning herself between Ren and Nova. Rain's team pulled Nova back immediately, securing her, moving her out of the direct line. The hostage, Mira, the logistics worker, was extracted at the same time, cut free and dragged out. Ren looked at Sloane now, fully focused. "You're the one," she said, almost amused. "You think you can control this?" "I don't need to control it," Sloane replied. "I just need to end it." The fight didn't last long after that. Ren was skilled, controlled, but she wasn't prepared for this version of Sloane, not restrained, not negotiating, not playing by any rules Ren understood. The gap closed quickly. A final shot rang out. Clean. Precise. Ren Castellano dropped. Silence followed. Not complete silence. There were footsteps, voices, the mechanical sounds of a team securing a scene. But the kind of silence that comes after something finishes. After something ends. Nova stood a few steps back, held steady by one of Rain's team. Breathing hard. Still upright. Her eyes were on Ren. Not in fear. Not in shock. Just watching. Sloane turned toward her slowly. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Sloane stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. "It's over," she said. Nova didn't respond right away. She looked down at her hands, then back up. "She's not coming back," she said. Like she needed to confirm it out loud. Like saying it might make it true in a way that simply knowing it couldn't. "No," Sloane replied. "She's not." That was when Nova's shoulders dropped slightly. The tension releasing, just enough to show what had been held in place for too long. She didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She just stood there, breathing, alive. And for the first time in a long time, not running. Behind them, Rain's team secured the area. Cleared the scene. Handled everything that came after. The operation was clean. But none of that mattered as much as the one thing that had changed. Nova wasn't a target anymore. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be about surviving. It would be about something else entirely. The days after Ren's death didn't feel like victory. They felt quiet. Not empty. Not cold. Just different. The kind of quiet that comes when something that has been chasing you for too long suddenly stops. When the noise in your head, the constant calculation of threat and escape and who might be watching, finally has nowhere to go. Nova didn't know what to do with it at first. Her body still reacted like the threat was there. She checked doors twice. Listened for footsteps that never came. Woke up at the smallest sound, a branch tapping a window, a car passing on the road outside, the house settling in the cold. But nothing followed. No messages. No signs. No flowers on doorsteps or shadows in parking lots. Ren was gone, and this time it stayed that way. They returned to Sloane's main residence 3 days later. The transition was smooth, controlled, just like everything else Sloane handled. Staff resumed their routines. Security stayed tight but less visible. And life continued. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside the house, the dynamic was no longer the same. Ember ran to Nova the moment they got back, throwing her arms around her without hesitation. "You were gone too long," she said, holding on tighter than usual. Nova froze for a second, then slowly relaxed. Her hand came up to rest on the girl's back. "I'm here," she said softly. That wasn't something she used to say before. It was always "I'm fine" or "don't worry" or some other deflection that meant I might not be here tomorrow. But this time, the words felt different. Heavier. More permanent. Ember didn't question it. She just nodded and stayed close. Sloane watched that from a distance. Not interfering. Not stepping in. Just observing. The connection between them had always been there, but now it was stronger. Not just comfort, something closer to attachment. And Nova wasn't pulling away from it anymore. The real change started at night. The first time it happened, Nova didn't even realize what she was doing. She woke up suddenly, breath uneven, body tense. The edge of a nightmare still clinging to her, not the details, not the images, just the feeling. The suffocating weight of someone else's control pressing down on her chest. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She waited. Listened. Tried to ground herself in the present. No locked doors. No footsteps. No voice telling her to stay still. Just silence. She got up anyway. She didn't think about it too much. She just moved, instinct guiding her. Down the hallway. Past the guest rooms. Past the main stairs. Her bare feet were silent on the hardwood floor. And stopped in front of Sloane's door. That was the moment her mind caught up with her body. She shouldn't be here. This wasn't part of her role. This wasn't safe. This wasn't controlled. She was staff. She was a nanny. She had no right to stand outside her employer's bedroom in the middle of the night, wearing nothing but an old T-shirt and the scars Ren had given her. She almost turned back. But the feeling didn't go away. It wasn't fear this time. It was something else. A pull. Not strong, not overwhelming, just steady. Like a thread connecting her to something she couldn't name. She knocked once. Quiet. Sloane opened the door almost immediately, like she hadn't been fully asleep. Her eyes moved over Nova quickly, taking in the details, the rumpled hair, the bare feet, the way her hands were curled into loose fists at her sides. No visible injury. No immediate threat. But something was off. What happened? Sloane asked. Nova hesitated. Nothing, she said. Then, after a second, I just couldn't sleep. That wasn't the full truth. But it wasn't a lie either. Sloane stepped back slightly. Come in. Nova didn't move right away. Then she did. The room was quiet. Simple. Controlled, like everything else Sloane owned. Dark wood furniture. A bed that was too large for one person. A window that faced the city, lights glittering in the distance. Nova stayed near the door at first, not crossing too far into the space. Her body was still tense, even if she didn't fully understand why. Sit, Sloane said. Not an order. Just a suggestion. Nova sat on the edge of the chair by the window. Hands resting loosely. Posture straight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nova said it quietly, like she wasn't sure she should. It's still there sometimes. Sloane didn't ask what it meant. The memory, Nova added. It doesn't stay gone just because she is. Sloane nodded once. That doesn't change overnight. Nova let out a small breath. I know. Another pause. Then something shifted. Nova leaned back slightly, not fully relaxed, but less rigid than before. Her shoulders dropped, just enough to show the difference. And without thinking too much about it, she moved just a little closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to close the space. Sloane noticed. She didn't move forward. Didn't reach out. Just stayed there. Steady. Controlled. Is this okay? Nova asked after a moment, her voice lower now. Sloane answered simply. Yes. That was enough. Nova didn't close the distance completely. Not that night. But she stayed longer than she needed to, long enough for her breathing to even out, long enough for the tension in her body to settle, long enough that when she finally stood to leave, she felt almost human again. At the door, she paused. Thank you, she said. Sloane didn't respond with words. She didn't need to. After that, it happened again. Not every night. Not always the same way. Sometimes Nova just stayed in the hallway, grounding herself before going back to her room. Sometimes she knocked. Sometimes Sloane found her already there, sitting quietly, not asking for anything but not leaving either. Each time, the distance closed a little more. One night, Nova didn't sit in the chair. She sat closer on the edge of the bed. Another night, her shoulder brushed against Sloane's arm, and she didn't pull away immediately. Another time, she fell asleep there without realizing it, waking up hours later still in the same place. No alarms. No consequences. It wasn't control. It wasn't instinct forcing her. It was choice. And that was new. During the day, things changed too. Just more subtly. Sloane stopped treating Nova like staff. Not in obvious ways, not in front of everyone, but in small decisions. Including her in conversations. Asking for her opinion on things that didn't involve childcare. Letting her stay in rooms she didn't have to leave. Nova noticed. She didn't question it out loud, but she adjusted slowly. Ember noticed the biggest difference. One afternoon, while Nova was helping her with a simple reading exercise, Ember looked up and asked, "Are you staying?" Nova paused. "I work here," she said. "That's not what I asked," Ember replied, serious in a way that didn't match her age. Nova looked at her, then answered more carefully. "I'm not leaving." Ember nodded once, satisfied. Then, after a second, "Are you my family?" That question landed harder than anything else. Nova didn't answer immediately. She glanced toward the doorway, where Sloane was standing, watching but not interrupting. Then she looked back at Ember. "I'm here for you," she said. It wasn't a direct answer, but it was honest. That night, when Nova stood outside Sloane's door again, she didn't hesitate as long before knocking. When the door opened, she didn't stay near the entrance this time. She stepped in. And when she sat down, it wasn't on the chair. It was closer. Not forced. Not rushed. Just closer. And for the first time, when the silence settled between them, it didn't feel like something that needed to be filled. It felt like something they both chose to stay in. Weeks passed. The nightmares came less often. The hypervigilance softened at the edges. Nova still checked doors, still noticed exits, still woke at small sounds, but the urgency had faded. The constant what-if in the back of her mind had quieted to a whisper. She started rolling up her sleeves in the kitchen. Not all the way. Just her forearms. Enough that the oldest scars, the ones that had faded to silver, were visible in the afternoon light. Quinn noticed, but didn't say anything. Ember noticed and asked, "What are those?" Nova answered honestly, "Old hurts. They don't hurt anymore." Ember accepted that. Children understood things adults complicated. Sloane noticed too. She didn't comment either. But her gaze lingered, and something in her expression shifted, not pity, not anger. Something softer. Something that looked like "I see you." The first time Nova's heat returned, she didn't recognize it at first. It had been so long. Years. Ren's treatments had suppressed everything, her scent, her cycles, her body's natural rhythms. Nova had assumed the damage was permanent. Had accepted that part of her was simply gone. But one evening, sitting in the living room after Ember had gone to bed, she felt it. A warmth at the base of her spine. A flutter in her chest. A slow, spreading heat that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Her gland, the ruined, silent gland that hadn't produced anything in years, throbbed. Nova's hand flew to her collar. She hadn't felt that in so long. Had forgotten what it felt like. The first stirrings of heat, slow and inexorable, pulling at her body in ways she couldn't control. "No," she whispered. "Not now. Not here." But her body didn't care about timing. The warmth spread. Her skin grew sensitive. Her breathing changed. And worst of all, her scent returned. Not fully. Not the way it should have been. It came back fractured, uneven, like a song missing half its notes. But it was there. Faint. Omega. Sloane walked into the room and stopped immediately. She couldn't help it. The scent hit her before she saw Nova's face, something sweet and broken, something that didn't smell like a normal heat but unmistakably was one. Her alpha instinct stirred, sharp and sudden. Nova. Her voice was controlled, but barely. Are you? I don't know. Nova's voice shook. I didn't think this could happen anymore. It's been years. I didn't. She couldn't finish the sentence. Sloane forced herself to stay still, to not step closer, to not let her alpha respond the way every instinct was screaming at her to respond. Nova wasn't ready for that. Might never be ready for that. What do you need? Sloane asked. Nova looked at her, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way she hadn't been since the day Sloane walked in on her scars. I don't know, she said again. I don't remember how to do this alone. That broke something in Sloane's chest. You're not alone, she said. She didn't move closer, didn't reach out, just stood there, steady, present, her alpha scent carefully restrained. Cedar and winter air, held back like a hand hovering over a flame. Nova's breathing was shallow. Her hands were shaking. The heat was building slow for now, but she knew how this worked. It would get worse. It would consume her if she didn't have help. Sloane. Her name came out rough. I'm scared. Sloane's restraint cracked, just slightly. Can I come closer? She asked. Nova nodded. Sloane moved slowly, deliberately. She sat on the opposite end of the couch, leaving space between them. Not touching, just close enough that Nova could feel her presence, her warmth, the steady rhythm of her breathing. I'm not going to do anything you don't ask for, Sloane said. But I'm not leaving. Nova closed her eyes. The heat pulsed through her. Her body needed, but her mind was still catching up, still processing the fact that this was happening at all. That her body wasn't as broken as she had believed. That somewhere beneath the scars and the damage, something still worked. She opened her eyes. Stay, she said. Just stay. Sloane nodded. They stayed like that for hours. Sloane didn't touch her, didn't push, didn't ask for anything. She just was there, a steady presence in the storm of Nova's body. When the heat peaked, not full force, not yet, but enough, Nova reached for her. Not sexually. Desperately. Her hand found Sloane's arm, gripped it like an anchor. Sloane let her. Didn't move. Didn't take advantage. You're safe, Sloane said quietly. You're in control. This is yours. Nova held on. And somewhere in the middle of the night, when the first wave passed and her breathing finally steadied, she realized something. Sloane hadn't touched her gland. Hadn't even looked at it. Had just been there, steady and patient, letting Nova navigate her own body at her own pace. That was when Nova started to believe that this was different. That Sloane wasn't Ren. That she could be safe here. The heat lasted 3 days. Not a full heat. Her body couldn't manage that anymore. Not after everything Ren had done. But a partial one. Unpredictable. Intense in waves, then fading, then surging again. Sloane stayed with her through all of it. She brought water. Food. Sat with Nova when the waves hit. Left when Nova asked her to. Came back when Nova called. Never once pushed. Never once made Nova feel like she owed anything. On the 3rd day, when the last wave faded and Nova's body finally settled, she looked at Sloane with something new in her eyes. Not gratitude. Not obligation. Something like trust. Why did you stay? Nova asked. Sloane considered the question. Because you asked me to. That's not. Nova stopped. Tried again. You could have taken advantage. I wouldn't have been able to stop you. Sloane's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened. Not with desire. With something harder. I'm not her, Sloane said. Nova held her gaze. I know, she said quietly. That's why I'm still here. After that, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained, employer and employee, alpha and damaged omega, dissolved. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But in small, irreversible ways. Sloane started touching Nova's hand when she passed her something. Light. Brief. Not demanding. Nova stopped flinching. She started holding on. One evening, sitting on the couch after Ember had gone to bed, Nova leaned against Sloane's shoulder. Not heavily. Tentatively. Testing. Sloane didn't move. Didn't say anything. Just let her stay. You smell different, Nova said quietly. Sloane's brow furrowed. I haven't. No, I mean, Nova hesitated. Before, I couldn't smell anything. From anyone. Ren made sure of that. But now, I can smell you. Just a little. Sloane's heart rate picked up. She kept her voice steady. What do I smell like? Cedar, Nova said. And winter. Cold air. Something that feels safe. That word landed between them like a stone in still water. Sloane didn't know what to say. Nova didn't seem to expect her to. They stayed like that until Nova fell asleep against her shoulder. Sloane didn't move for a long time. The bond didn't happen the way Nova expected. She had assumed, if it ever happened at all, that it would be like before. Pressure. Control. Something taken from her rather than given. But Sloane never asked. Never pushed. Never even brought it up. So Nova had to be the one. It happened on a quiet evening, weeks after her heat had faded. Ember was asleep. The house was still. Nova found Sloane in her office, staring at a screen she wasn't really reading. Sloane. Sloane looked up. Nova walked in. Closed the door behind her. Stood in front of Sloane's desk with her hands at her sides, not hiding, not folding into herself the way she used to. I want to ask you something, Nova said. Sloane set down her tablet. Gave Nova her full attention. Okay. Nova's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. Do you want to bond with me? The silence that followed was not uncertain. It was full, heavy with everything that had brought them to this moment. Sloane stood up slowly, walked around the desk, stopped in front of Nova. I want whatever you want, she said. And I want you to know, if you never want to bond, that doesn't change anything between us. Nova's throat tightened. I know, she said. That's why I'm asking. Sloane reached up slowly, gave Nova time to pull back. Her fingers brushed Nova's collar, not pushing it aside, just resting there. Asking permission. Nova nodded. Sloane pushed the collar aside gently, exposing the scarred gland beneath. The marks Ren had left were still there. Still visible. Still ugly. But Nova didn't flinch. I choose this, she said. I choose you. Sloane leaned in. Her lips brushed the damaged skin. Not a bite, not yet. Just a kiss. Gentle. Reverent. I won't hurt you, Sloane murmured against her neck. I know, Nova whispered. The bond, when it happened, wasn't overwhelming. Wasn't painful. It was warm. Steady. Something that connected instead of taking. A warmth that spread through Nova's chest, filling spaces she hadn't even known were empty. Her gland, the ruined, broken gland that had been silent for years, finally responded. Not fully. Not the way it should have. But enough. A scent bloomed between them. Faint. Fragile. Something sweet and soft, like honey and rain. Nova's scent. Sloane pulled back just enough to look at her. Her eyes were dark, but not with control. With something softer. Something that looked like wonder. There you are, Sloane said quietly. Nova exhaled. Her hand came up to touch her own neck, the place where the bond mark would form, would heal, would become something new instead of something broken. I'm here, she said. That night, nothing dramatic followed. No sudden shift in the world outside. No new threats. Just quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the kind that comes from fear, the hyper-vigilant silence of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. The kind that comes from finally being safe. From not having to listen for footsteps anymore. From being able to breathe without measuring each breath. Nova stayed in Sloane's room that night. Not because she was afraid. Not because she needed protection. Because she wanted to. And in the morning, when she woke up with Sloane's arm draped across her waist and sunlight filtering through the curtains, she didn't feel the usual rush of panic that came from being vulnerable while unconscious. She felt something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. But it felt like home. For the first time, Nova didn't have to tell herself she was safe. She knew it. And just like that, what began as survival became something deeper. Trust. Choice. And a love that was never forced, only given. Nova was no longer running. And Sloane no longer stood alone. Together, they built something steady. Something real. The scars remained. They always would. But they were no longer the only thing Nova could feel when she closed her eyes. Now, underneath them, there was something else. Cedar and winter air. Honey and rain. A bond that had been chosen, not taken. And a future that finally belonged to her.